But you know, as I write in the book, you know, our democracy has been strained. That is not solely as a result of Donald Trump. You know, the stories that I tell about my presidency indicate how some of these trends were already there. The tendency for the Republican Party to object and obstruct even policies that they had previously proposed themselves, if I was the one who was proposing it. The kinds of conspiracy theories and very loose association to truth that you saw in some of the right-wing media and now on social media that allowed first the birther movement within the Republican Party, now assertions by the president that there's been fraud and illegality in an election that even Republican local officials have certified as not having had any significant problems. It's some of these trends are deeply rooted, and it's going to take some time for us to work through them. But at the end of the day, I do have faith in American democracy, in part because I have faith in the young people who I've seen, not just in the United States, but around the world. They are instinctively inclusive. They instinctively believe in equality and justice for people, even if they're not like themselves. They recognize that you know, the free market has to have some regulations that allow you know, poor people to advance, that ensure environmental sustainability. You know, I think the trend lines are good, but you know, it can be a bumpy ride along the way.
The Brazil are being torn down, are being ripped down. More carbon is absorbed in that rainforest than every bit of carbon that's emitted in the United States. I would be gathering up and making sure we had the countries of the world coming up with $20 billion. Say, here's $20 billion. Stop tearing down the forest. And if you don't, then you're going to have significant economic consequences. What about the art?
Now, Joe Biden indicated that could list Brazil as a climate outlaw. The Brazilian president reacted with threats of using gunpowder instead of saliva. Biden once called him boldeceiro, which sounds close, but it's far from correct. Which advice would you give first to Bolsonaro and secondly to your partner in bromance, Joe Biden, to start lowering the tensions?
Well, look, I don't know Brazil's president. I had already left office when he assumed office. And so I don't want to give an opinion on somebody that I haven't met. I will say that based on what I've seen, his policies, similar to Donald Trump's policies, seem to have de-emphasized the science of climate change. And Brazil is obviously a central player in whether or not we're going to be able to arrest the increases in temperatures that could cause global catastrophe. And you know, I was fortunate that whether it was President Lula, you know, Dilma Rousseff, that they both worked with us cooperatively on these issues. And I think Brazil has in the past been a leader on this, and it would be a shame if it stopped being a leader. I think when you look at the pandemic in terms of how Donald Trump has dealt with it and how it's being dealt with in Brazil, there's been a de-emphasis on science. And there are consequences to that. So my hope would be that with a new Biden administration, there's the opportunity to reset the relationship. I do know that Joe Biden is going to emphasize that climate change is real, and both the United States and Brazil have a leadership role to play. I do know that Joe Biden will emphasize the science around COVID-19 is real, and that we have to mobilize not just within each of our own countries, but internationally to try to bring an end to this pandemic. But at the end of the day, the United States and Brazil have so much in common, and the progress that needs to be made, not just in the hemisphere, but around the world, in part is going to be determined by the quality of the relationship between our two countries. And so, look, when I came into office, as I describe in the book, we had a very strained relationship with Russia. Russia had invaded Georgia. The United States had broken off relations in a lot of ways for at least the first 2 years, partly because President Medvedev was in power. We were able actually to negotiate reductions in nuclear weapons. We were able to cooperate on a wide range of issues. When Putin came back into power, those relationships became strained again. But it indicates that even when you're starting off a relationship where the countries have appeared at odds or there are differences between leaders, that it's still possible to create a constructive relationship, and I hope that's what happens this time.
Well, you mentioned Michelle, and you have been influenced by fantastic women your entire life.
That is true.
And your party has been shaken by very powerful female voices recently, including Kamala Harris, the vice president elected.
But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last.
I'm thinking you're very used to girl power, right? Are we close to having Madam President at the White House, do you think? And would it be a last name Harris, or could it be a last name Obama?
Well, it definitely won't be a last name Obama. Michelle will not run.
No.
That I promise, and I think she's brainwashed the girls into not wanting to be involved in politics at all. They've seen too much. But I think we're very close. Look, we have somebody right down the hall in Kamala Harris. Once she's sworn in, she's going to be, a few steps away from the Oval Office, and she's an extraordinarily talented person. I think that in some ways, resistance to women in political leadership has been just as powerful as resistance to people of color in these highest offices. It's deeply rooted in our cultures, not just U.S. culture or Brazilian culture, but around the globe. Women still suffer from discrimination. They still are oftentimes excluded from the table of power. There are countries in which girls are still not getting the kind of educational opportunity or employment opportunities that they deserve, and are still subject to domestic violence and abuse. And so the work of empowering women is ongoing. And as I've said before, it was interesting, as president, I would observe those countries that repress their women, that don't use women's talents, tend to be the countries that do not develop economically and that have other problems. And the countries that oftentimes do well and are able to harness the full potential of that country, in part is because they recognize if we don't get girls and women, half of the population involved in solving our problems and creating businesses and finding cures for new diseases. If we're not training half the population, it'd be like a football team that leaves half the team off the field. You're going to lose. So I hope that Kamala Harris is just the beginning of a process in which more and more women around the world are seen as viable leaders at the highest levels. And it's been interesting. I think some have observed that right now the countries that have women leaders in New Zealand and Germany are doing some of the best job in handling the coronavirus. I don't think that's entirely an accident.
A gente vai fazer um rápido intervalo comercial e volta com mais Barack Obama em instantes.